Dear beautiful souls, today I would like to address a topic that is rather complex, that is not easily handled in a public setting. But I feel that we have changes in human society, especially over the last 2 years, that not only make it necessary, but I do slowly feel that humanity might actually be ready for this type of input. Now, for Christians, for example, or for Muslims, it is not a new topic, the idea of the demonic, the devilish forces that are trying to influence human consciousness. Through changes in the world stage over the last, let's say, two years, the dark side has made itself known. It used to be in the shadows, it used to hide because it is the most effective when it is stealthy. But through creating certain worldwide agendas of a dictatorial nature, it has made itself not only known, it is showing that it is actually scrambling for control, because now it is being made visible, which leads to a panic response within the dark energy. Now, any mystical practitioner at some point in their practice will have to face the darkness in meditation. It is unavoidable, it is actually an initiation test, and we must be able to pass through the darkness without reacting to it, without becoming a vibrational match to it. Those of you who are rather fearful by tendency, I would say do not continue this video. If this is so, this video is not for you. If you have a lot of intellectual pride and you think you can analyze the universe and figure out the higher levels of mysticism by thinking, also do not continue this video, because that means you're not ready either. Now, there are two reasons why those who have a fear response should not consciously face the dark side, and it's also those who have intellectual pride should not consciously face the dark side. Since the demons operate on a low frequency band, if your default response to many experiences is fear, there's a great chance that if you get involved in the topic, that you will bring yourself into a lower frequency band, which actually makes you a match to those entities, and then they can, through certain types of psychic oppression, begin influencing your mind. And therefore it is not wise, if the default state is fear, to approach this in an active manner, but rather to do religious practice that have to do with faith and belief, for example going to church and so on, instead of trying in an occult way to face these type of temptations and dangers. For those who are intellectual, they need to understand that the demonic is incredibly advanced in terms of intelligence and will easily outplay any human mind who tries to match it in intelligence. Therefore, those who believe in the power of intellect, they will actually also fail when faced with demonic entities. Because they exist in dimensions where they have access to much more information than the average human being, what is very apparent to them in a way is that by looking at your energy, they know your desires, they know your hidden shames, they know what you have done in a past life, they know what your weaknesses are. So they exactly know how to play the game, and they're already starting it with an information advantage. If you're not a high-level yogi who has access to hundreds of lifetimes of your own experience, knows exactly where your weaknesses are, there is not a chance in any way to outwit demonic intelligence. And even those who have a similar information level do not play this game, because it is a game of pride. In fact, not playing the game is the way to get through the game. We'll get into that in a little bit. I made a few notes because this topic is complex, to help you guys out, to structure this a little bit, so we actually come to an understanding what is actually the demonic, why is it allowed to exist in the universe, Well, the demonic serves as a free will agent. They offer you free will by giving you an alternative option to God's will. This is of the essence. This is why the divine does not simply erase the demonic, because your individualization and your evolution as a soul is determined on making choices between light and dark. This leads to individualization. This leads to soul imprint through experience. So in this way, from a much, much higher perspective, the demonic actually serves the highest good by offering you choice, which therefore then lead to you developing a sense of individuality, understanding karma, understanding the laws of creation. However, the demonic can never be trusted, should never be trusted. And for those of us who serve the light, we understand the demonic as the tempter that wants to get us away from divine service, that wants us to make choices of separateness, of selfishness, of desire, so we go against God, therefore lowering our vibration so they can exert influence over our minds and use our minds as a medium to operate within the physical reality. So depending on where you are in evolution, your perspective on the demonic will be very different. If you come from a very fundamentalist religious background, the position will most likely be very, very fearful and in a way trying to brush the whole topic under the carpet so you don't have to deal with it. This is not very, very helpful, because if there are subconscious fears in you and karma in you that they could operate through, if you're not willing to observe them, you cannot counteract the impulses that they will give you. So, but I want to make this very clear. I want to demystify the topic also a little bit, because demons are in truth nothing special. They are operating everywhere where there are gatherings of humans and try to influence human consciousness, and they have been doing this for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So they are basically parasites that feed off human energy, and they do this by using oppressive psychic thought mechanisms. So if you experience, for example, a lot of automatic, repetitive, compulsive thought that are of a negative, of a fearful nature, of a judging nature, of a prideful nature, of a intense, lustful, or let's say materialistic nature, these are thoughts that are influenced by demons, and if we buy into these thoughts, we vibrate on a frequency that they can actually feed off. And this is how subconscious contracts with demons actually come into being. Yeah, when humans make choice out of separateness, let's say you are a starving homeless person, there's another starving homeless person next to you, and you find a sandwich, you either share that sandwich with the other person, yeah, 50-50, or you don't. Every time you don't make a choice out of union but out of separateness, by emphasizing your ego, the survival of your body and your mind before the, let's say, the well-being of the entirety, what happens that you then slowly fall more and more into the demonic, because the tendency is to act from separation, therefore lowering your frequency. That is important to understand. So demons are actually in truth the most effective when they are undetected, and this is what they basically bet on. They want to influence you in your dream state, they want to influence you when you are in argument with somebody, they just will give you a telepathic thought that will, for example, escalate the argument. Or when you meditate, they will bombard you with pornographic images. So for example, what they can do is, if you watched a lot of pornography and that memories in your brain, they can trigger that memory, so it will pop up while you are trying to contact your soul in meditation, and they will try to distract you in such a way. Yeah. So, but they are most effective again when they're undetected. Stealth is what they use the most. So if you only know, oh, there are pornographic thoughts, or I can't forgive this person and this thought keeps compulsively repeating and so on, it's very easy to think that these are your thoughts, but these are offerings from the lower astral realm to become a match to the lower astral realm. So the dark side wants you to make these choices, so you are closer and closer in frequency to the dark side, and therefore the dark side can exert more influence over your mind, and they will make you forget that you are actually a divine being. Yeah, when you have so much ego content and ego constructs in your mind that are so compulsively non-stop thinking, you will simply forget your divinity. So they're agents of amnesia. They make you forget God. This is what their job is. Yeah, but in order to be effective, again, they want to be undetected. So if you have, for example, pornographic images coming up, violent pictures, if you don't want to forgive a certain person, please understand that there are intelligences out there. They will want you to buy into this idea that you, for example, cannot transmute your sexual energy, that forgiveness is impossible for you, that you cannot get past the sexual obsessions. That's exactly what they want to believe you. So you're stuck, and therefore they can use you to feed off your emotional and sexual energy. Yeah. So as I said before, they can be detected when you experience automatic compulsive thoughts that are negative or desire based, and also behind every thought that is a judgment. All judgments are of a demonic nature. They are not of a divine nature. The divine discerns, but it doesn't judge. What do I mean by that? So the divine, if we speak about of a high level being who might, for example, observe you, this high level being will look into your energy and simply assess the state of your evolution, but it will not condemn you. It will not say, in a way, oh, such an evil individual, he should be ashamed of himself. Yeah, so it will not have that type of emotional charge. It will be more matter of fact. It's kind of like observing physics. If you, for example, measure the current of electricity in a power line, this is simply an objective statement, but you're not making a judgment, oh, the power line is evil or the power line is good. So the divine in this way, it can discern where you're at, yes, and it sees the amount of darkness in you, it sees the amount of light in you, but it will not condemn you. Yeah? This is something only the darkness does. Now, the demonic can, in the majority, it can only work through our shadows. What does that mean, for example? If you have a desire that you're not conscious of, that you're ashamed of, and you have suppressed it, now it comes out as judgment, for example. Yeah, let's say you have an eating issue that you do not own up to, but you suddenly judge people who are overweight. Or you look at a very attractive woman or a very, very attractive man and you have evil thoughts about them because actually subconsciously you desire them, but you're not owning up to it. So that means that when you have these shadows that are disowned, these are kind of access point for the demonic that it can use to influence you to do unconscious actions. If you know your shadows and you're vigilant and you can observe that, it's much harder for them to give you any impulses that could lead to self-harm or harm of others. The demonic uses in the majority pain, fear, and desire as a gateway. So when you have pain, and you don't want to feel the pain, you don't want to be conscious of the pain, so you dissociate and suppress the feeling of that pain, you allow the dark side basically to use your body and to act through your body, because only through observation can you make choice. If you don't observe the pain and you don't feel the impulses coming through it, you technically have no choice, you will just be reactive and therefore act from your lower nature and produce karma out of ignorance. If you become aware of their existence, they want you to be afraid, because then you start vibrating on their frequency and they can exert influence. So as I stated before, demons cannot be defeated by analysis or intellect. They need to be met with faith, vigilance, which means the ability to observe no matter if you're tired, no matter if you're exhausted. It means continuous mindfulness to see what type of impulses go through this aggregate of the body-mind complex. Yeah, so what is much more important than analysis or intellect is actually the ability to sense the energy of a thought. Instead of thinking, oh, is this thought right, is this thought wrong, feel it to the energy of the thought. Does it feel low frequency? Does it feel higher frequency? And by constantly practicing that, slowly you develop discernment, which, for example, thought communications of the Holy Spirit, and which thought communication is of a demonic nature. heavy karmic choices entangle us with demonic forces. What do I mean by that? If, for example, in a lifetime, there was an agreement made with a dark entity because, for example, if you believed you were a victim in a situation and in this situation you felt you had to gain control in order to survive or to protect someone, and you made contracts with a dark force that, for example, took your empathy away or gave you rage so you could perform certain acts, when you have these contracts going, they will be recognizable because these type of attributes, they're expressing themselves in your current incarnation. That means these contracts are still functioning. Now, in order to undo these contracts, we need to do shadow work. That means we need to dive deeply into the pain and especially into the shame and unearth, or let's say do an archaeology of these type of traumas and injuries, to then find out what part of us have we exiled that the demonic can use as a bridge to influence us subconsciously. So when we have brought these parts back up and they are fully integrated into us, they cease to be a point of vulnerability because now it's fully observable. If you do not, let's say, believe in general in the idea of shame, even though shame might exist in you, but you do understand that shame is a very low frequency perspective, it's a very self-harming state. If you can integrate even the most difficult traumatic experiences, and that means also past life experience where maybe you have been a murderer, maybe you have been a rapist, maybe you have done whatever horrible things that right now your ego might be totally in resistance to. Said, I would never do such things. People who do such things are extremely evil and whatever. Well, that's then, in many cases, it is a projection. Because a lot of people who react very intensely and judgmental towards evil are actually those who do not investigate their own shadows and carry a lot of subconscious evil in them. So when we make the evil of other lifetimes, and what do I mean by evil? Again, I don't mean it in a very, or let's say not even very, I don't mean it in a judgmental way. What I mean is acts of separation, acts that have lead to an accumulation of low density material and trap you in lower states of perception, of ignorance. If you have had a lot of these type of choices, they do influence you. They do influence your ability to perceive, for example, the light of the Holy Spirit, the light of God or not. The more dense the material is around you, the less you are actually able to perceive divine light. So then we need to do the digging. We need to touch the hot plate. We need to go into the most painful parts of ourselves. But if we do so, we are basically creating an inoculation against evil. So shadow work, of course, is tremendously important because every time you integrate a shadow aspect of you, an access point for the demonic is lost. They cannot attack you in this type of area. In a way, let me see. I made notes about this. I'll find it. All right. So basically, only when there's a shadow projection, that means you don't know what your subconscious soul trauma is, and you project that outwards into the world and you try to fight it into the world in the world by judging others and attacking others, this is when they can operate through you. But if you are so mindful that you catch the projections before they actually become actions, they will have a hard time manipulating you. Yeah. So if you can observe the projections through a meditative ability, then in a way there will be no mirroring karmic actions that come towards you, and the demonic influence will drastically decrease. Now, in general, how do we counteract these type of forces? Well, in the majority, every beginner in spiritual practice needs to do shadow work, needs to practice meditation excessively, and needs to engage in selfless prayer. That means praying for the liberation of the totality of sentient beings. Yeah, don't focus on selfish prayer in what you can get from God, but focus on how can you be of service? How can you free yourself of distortion? How can the Holy Spirit enter you and use you as an instrument for good rather than the dark using you as an instrument for separation? So in this way, the answer is devotion to God and his representations, depending on what religion you operate in, or maybe you even don't operate in a particular religion, but you find core truth in many of the religions. The answer then is devotion to God and his true representations. So it can be, for example, if you're Christians, that you focus on certain saints, that you, for example, pray to Saint Francis, to Mother Mary, and so on, that you pray to certain angelic forces. In the Hindu faith, it can be that you begin building a relationship to a particular deity, for example, for protection. Yeah. The same goes, for example, in Buddhism and other practices. So then devotional practice, number one. Second, the cultivation of virtue. This is tremendously important. If you cultivate virtue and you do virtuous actions, you become a vessel that, because of its high vibration, is not a place a demonic entity can get its hooks in or steal energy from you or reside in. They need you to do sinful actions. They need you to act from separation, to obsess over materialism and sexual desires. They need you to engage in a lot of low frequency action, so you become a host that provides a climate that for them is actually hospitable. But if you're very devotional, if you cultivate virtue, that means you act selflessly as much as possible, act out of compassion, try to assist people, make sacrifices, then the dark side has a very, very hard time. So the thriving for selflessness and the cultivation of virtue, as well as devotional practice, is the remedy long-term for such a situation. But there will be many tests, many temptations, and through great discernment, one must succeed in these type of initiation tests. No? So either when we make a choice between light and dark, and we make them hundreds of times during the day, every time you make a choice for the dark, it's a falling into temptation. If you make a choice for the light, it's an initiation success. And that needs to be understood, because you need to cultivate your mind and your energy like you would cultivate a field if you would be a farmer. Yeah? But don't go for fast successes by saying, I'm going to spray the field and poison it. No, you need to cultivate in the proper way, at the proper speed, with the proper amount of water. And then your harvest will be beautiful. Very important. Do not seek power to defeat the demonic. Power is another trap. Power itself is a manifestation of fear. If I seek power, I want to avoid something because I want power over a situation. So if I have power, let's say if I have $2 million, I don't need to deal with this particular issue. But then I'm trying to circumvent the karmic yoga issue that I actually need to address directly by, for example, using any sort of means that give me power so I don't have to deal with the pain, the shame, or the difficulty of spiritual practice. But you always need to deal with the pain and the shame and the difficulty of spiritual practice. That is the truth of it. Yeah? So trying to seek power, to either feel powerful is a form of narcissistic greed. To want to defeat demons, to feel righteous and to be a warrior of God is also a narcissistic thing. If you do not have the blessing of a very, very, very high level being in the universe to counteract certain demonic forces, do not do this. Simply focus on the act of devotion toward God and his true representation, the cultivation of virtue and the thriving for selflessness. If you do that, again, you're not a host that is hospitable to these type of energies. Yeah? Spiritual power is for high-level mystics, high-level yogis that are so in tune with God that God can act through them. So they are not acting, it is God that is, for example, counteracting demonic force. And even that needs always, let's say, investigated or checked if an intervention is even appropriate. Because there are a lot of human beings who, for example, have demonic forces around them as a form of teaching mechanism. So if somebody is, for example, highly manipulative, and there would be some mystical practitioner who has the ability to perform an exorcism, and they're now removing that entity, but that entity was there to produce a certain suffering that would lead to surrender, so a yearning for God would be created in that individual, and spiritual practice would develop. In the moment you take the pain away and you remove the dark entity, that soul has not learned and is highly likely going to repeat the same issue. So only in very specific cases are we actually allowed to remove demonic entities directly. But a mystical practitioner, as a sovereign being, is allowed to cast out entities in his immediate environment, or entities that are in particular targeting the mystical practitioner. In terms of divine law, this is allowed. But to remove demonic entities that have contract with other beings that are not you, even though ultimately they are you, but in the subjective reality they have a different individualized experience, they have used their free will in such a way that they attract these entities, and those entities are there to mirror their free will choices back to them. So they become conscious of their creation and can experience accountability. So to take pain away is not necessarily a good thing. Please reflect on that. So this is a complicated topic. I hope that the points I made give you a general idea of how to carefully begin developing your spiritual practice and approaching this. Please contemplate on the issues I have mentioned. Be well.